All right, welcome everyone. I'm Lisa Beregi, the Education Chair for National Ski Council Federation, and I'd like to welcome you to this year's travel educational seminar, once again presented by Sara Clemons, President of Sports America Tours. If you were at Mountain Travel, you may have heard some of this, but couple quick housekeeping things. Like I said, I'm trying to keep everybody muted. Would like to use the chat for questions. Sarah has put topics and segments, and she'll address the questions between the segments and then again in general questions afterwards. I've been asked by the webmaster who controls the Zoom calls that we do, that when we do educational Zoom calls, when you get the invite, please do not try to log on in advance. He says that anytime somebody logs in prior to the meeting, days in advance, whenever it is, that he gets notification somebody's tried to log in and it starts a recording that he has to then go in and delete. So in the future, do not log in advance. Wait until about 15 minutes before the actual time. And then um, the website, if you haven't been to it recently, we now have a calendar on it. And so the calendar has the calls with the link on it. So if you lose the email or can't find it, you can always just go to the Federation website and it'll have the link to the call to get in. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. Sarah, thank you. And let's go.
All right.
We will record it. We are recording it, and it'll also be posted on the website.
Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining me this evening. I see lots of familiar faces and some new people, so I just appreciate you taking the time. I work closely with the National Ski Council Federation and I work with MTS to do this kind of same presentation there, mostly because I feel like it's so important to make sure that our little niche travel industry stays as healthy and as vibrant as we can. And every year, I feel like things change a little bit faster and a little bit more than the previous year. And so I just want to do my piece to try to keep us all up to speed. This is not a tell-all. Like I have the answers for everybody. It's more of posing some questions, making some statements, making sure we're all aware of some changes and some policies, and then you guys are thinking within your organizations about what you can do with that information and how you can make sure that you're staying as healthy and successful as possible. So with that, I'm going to start a PowerPoint slideshow that you guys can follow along with. It's very bullet pointed, but it'll just keep me on topic and give you guys a little bit of follow along here. Okay, Lisa, can we see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. So the changing landscapes of group travel. So we're going to talk about what has changed and then how these changes impact group travel and what we can all do, like I just said, to keep all of our organizations successful and thriving. Hot topics that I'm going to discuss this evening include group air and airline policies, season pass products, those mega passes like Epic and Icon, our booking cycles with your RFPs, with your contracts, with your sales, contract terms, when you're getting your contracts, what do those look like and how do they compare to what they used to? And then creating successful trips to wrap it up. Try to end on a positive note. All right, so jumping right into group airline policies. What has changed? So just a quick overview. In the past year, there's not been too much change to group airline policies. Probably the biggest change recently has been within Southwest. They, as you guys likely know, got rid of the free bags. I have started doing seat assignments. So lots of travel changes within the Southwest market and also in their booking terms. So their group contracts have become much more restrictive. They're asking for a lot higher deposit than they used to, a non-refundable deposit. Once you book that space, you're on the hook for, I believe it's 25% of the total fare. Right off the bat. So you better be pretty confident you're going to sell your Southwest seats if you dive into a Southwest contract. Something else to note just about contract terms is that depending on what avenue you're booking it through is going to dictate different terms. So just something to keep in mind, if you go directly to United, you will get different group terms than I might get with United because we have a preferred wholesale contract. And then that goes between different tour operators as well, depending on what contracts the different tour operators you work with have within these airline agencies. They may be able to offer you different terms or better terms than, say, someone else. So just because one agency gives you one set of terms doesn't necessarily mean that that is carte blanche always going to be the term. So it's just really good to know that there is some variety out there, and be cognizant of that. And most of the time, those wholesale contracts are going to give more flexible terms than if you just go direct. And then I think another big thing besides the terms that have changed in this past year, and those go to your deposit requirements and when you're allowed to drop seats and when your names and ticketing are due, that's all been pretty consistent. I think a bigger change in the long run that we're all dealing with are individuals' knowledge and promos associated to airlines compared to the group contracts. So, 10 years ago, it used to be really great to have a group contract because you were getting the best price and you were getting the best terms. And most travelers 10, 20 years ago did not have their own mileage preferences, their own mileage programs. The airline industry and the credit card industry have really targeted travelers into making their own allegiances with specific credit cards and specific airlines, which has taken away from the value of the group records. I should have clicked this earlier. Here's some writing to go along with it. So the individual travelers, they now, many of them will have a credit card. You get a United credit card, and that United credit card is going to give you free bags as long as you book your United flight with them. You're going to have mileage programs that allow you complimentary upgrades, as long as you're meeting a certain status limit. And people are prioritizing their airline travel much more than they used to, which is detracting from the value of group air. Where group air still has a really big value is that you're getting rate equity. So you're able to book 30, 40 seats all at the same price, and you don't have to associate those to specific people until much closer into travel. Whereas, as you all know, an individual ticket, you have to buy that ticket, pay for it in full, and associate a name to that right off the bat. And that person has to be the one that uses that ticket. So that's your big value with the group air, is getting a lot of seats for the same price and being able to keep that open-ended for a very long time. The negatives to that, though, is that you have a lot more restricted, now that your travelers are a lot more knowledgeable and have their own preferences. The group air doesn't have that value. So oftentimes group air isn't letting you check in online and adding your bags in advance. Sometimes it is, and many of the airlines are doing more to try to allow that to happen. But in many cases, if you're on a group record, you're not checking it online in advance, or the trip leader is checking in online for the entire group. Deviations are a lot more difficult, if at all possible. So it's a lot harder to change just one ticket out of that group if somebody has to go home early, or if they end up with a trip conflict right before the trip happens and they say, oh, well, I need to come out a couple days later. You don't have that flexibility like you do as an individual traveler to just change it on your app and, maybe pay a little bit of extra fee, but easily change it. There's no or very, very little weekend support with many of these airlines group contracts. So many, many, many groups are traveling on Saturdays and or Sundays, and there's no group United desk. There's no group American desk. You try to call support and somebody answers the phone. It's like, oh, well, you're on a group record. I can't help you. Depending on who you're booked with, if it's through a tour operator, are they available, and do they have other contacts to help you fix that? So there's a definite hurdle with the group contracts and the flexibility and the support that you get during your travel time. And then, like I said, those individual travelers have their mileage programs that give them complimentary upgrades, complimentary bag checks. Those things don't exist. You cannot get those if you're on the group travel. It doesn't matter if you're a million miler, you won't necessarily get your complimentary upgrade when you're part of that group record. Um, so it's changed our group travel dramatically. You have participants that no longer want the group air. They're at a disadvantage by using the group air. They still want to participate, but how do they do that? And how do we navigate that? So things to consider if you are looking at potentially offering a land-only package in your trips. The last couple of years, I've had more and more clubs that have opted not to include group air in their package. They've made that decision that they say, we're going to recommend that everybody take this specific flight, or we're going to set criteria that says in order to qualify for the group transportation, you have to arrive at the airport by this time and you cannot go home earlier than this time, and then you can utilize your transportation. Some things to consider with that. Can your travelers manage that? There's a lot of travelers out there that really rely on these group packages because they don't want to mess with it. The beauty of these group packages is that they want to be able to sign up with you, pay you the money, and you handle it. We handle it, right? They don't want to have to go look for a flight. They don't want to have to figure out the schedule and remember to check in and do any of that, mess with the schedule change if it happens. That is supposed to be the beauty and the ease of group travel. So really understanding your audience and knowing whether you're going to get huge pushback and a meltdown over not offering it, or if you have savvy travelers that would prefer to do that, or maybe many of them are doing that already. So switching to a land only option would benefit most of the travelers. Can your destination support it? So really looking at what the transportation component is once you get to your destination. There are many destinations out there that can absolutely support this. You can fly into Hayden and there's shared ride shuttles, whether you're landing at 9 o'clock at night or you're departing at 6:15 in the morning. You're one person or you're 15 people, you can accommodate that. But then there's other destinations, like if you fly into Reno and your trip is down to Mammoth and you're trying to get two people from Reno to Mammoth, that's not going to happen. And making sure that you're aware of those constraints and those options before you even book the trip is really important. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to talk a lot about communication to set yourself up for success. The number one thing is communication with your travel planner to make sure that you've covered all the bases and that you're making the best decision for your organization and your travelers. Something else to consider as you're thinking about the land-only package or including group air is what airlines are at play into that destination and what their specific terms are, because that can come into play a lot with your decision as well. Are there a lot of carriers? If you're flying into Kalispell, you only have got a few options, and so it might make a lot more sense to do the group air. But if you're flying into Denver, there's a lot of different options. People can easily accommodate time requests. So thinking about those as you're making your decisions. And then along with the terms and the airlines at play is what aircrafts are available and what size is your trip. Because you might want to, if you're flying into Bishop, they're only flying smaller jets there. The most you could get on an aircraft is 29 people. Well, if you're booking a group of 44, maybe you don't want to do group air at all because you can only get 2/3 of your group on that group air. So all things to consider, and communicate with your travel planner about what your options are and how the trip and the destination can accommodate your priorities. All right, so oh man, go back. That kind of gets to the end of my airfare section. I'm going to throw up the chat, and if you guys have any questions about how do I find chat? Any questions about airfare? No? We're good? No questions? Moving right along? I love it. Oh, get out of here. Okay. So moving along to season passes, our mega pass products. The two that I'm going to discuss this evening are your Epic Pass and your Icon Pass. I know that there's other pass options. There's mountain specific passes. There's your Mountain Collective Pass. There's the Indie Pass. Those ones aren't as applicable to our destination group travel options. So I'm not going to worry about them tonight. The Epic and the Icon Pass hit our world decade or so ago. And I think we've all finally come around to the fact that they're not going anywhere. And, the past sales that we've seen so far this year have indicated that the travelers and the clubs are finally embracing the product and realizing that there is a lot of benefit if they can get behind it. And I think the organizations have started doing a really great job of taking some of this information, like I'm going to talk about tonight, and applying it so that the traveler, your members, are getting the most benefit as they can from these past products because they're here to stay. They've created a great potential for added experience in most cases that we're all doing a much better job of educating ourselves on and making sure our membership is capitalizing on that. And they've also had a huge impact on our booking timeline and our travelers' commitment timelines. As we get to the booking timeline topic in a little bit, I think a lot of that started with the COVID compression when so many trips rolled forward, but that was a tiny little piece of this giant booking shift. I think the biggest impact to our booking cycle change is due to these season pass products. They get announced. Epic and Icon both go on sale in late March typically, and your best pricing has expired by mid-April. So that means that if you guys as organizations aren't planning your destinations, getting a trip lineup figured out, in 18 months ahead of time, that by the time they announce, it's going to be well past April, and your travelers aren't going to know what your plan is for the next season. So they're not going to be able to capitalize on the best pricing possible. So we've really had to shift to plan destinations early and announce to your people early. In doing that, that doesn't mean that you have to have your entire trip at everything, sign up, registration, make it all happen by April. What you do need is just a basic save the date, essentially. You want to have your trip lineups, what destinations you're going to, what dates you're going to do that so people can plan accordingly and know, oh, I can do this trip over these dates and those dates work for me as well. It's a great idea to buy an Icon Pass this year because two of these destinations are Icon. You don't have to release pricing. You don't have to release trip details, lodging details. It's literally just a basic save the date. You can get people excited on your trips for the year before. When you're on your trip in January of 2027, you can be announcing your 2028 destinations and say more information to come. So doing that and making that shift has really allowed a lot of our your membership, to have a much better benefit and get these passes as cheap as possible. Aligning multiple resorts and multiple trips for the added benefit. I think that that's really helped a lot. Travelers' trips are more expensive. So, they're not able to travel on as many trips as they may have been able to in the past, but by buying a pass product, it offers them that opportunity to easily add in another trip and not have to worry about all of the funds that it requires to do that. One thing that is really important is educating your travelers, not just about your destinations and your trips, but educating your travelers about the past products. And I joke with many of my trip leaders that anymore you need a dang degree in snowology to understand what pass you're supposed to be buying, depending on what destinations you're supposed to be going to. And making sure that your travelers for a specific destination know the restrictions, that they know if they're going to Telluride and they have a super discounted military season pass on Epic, it's not going to work at Telluride. There's all sorts of intricacies that align with these different passes to all these different destinations. And it's tricky. We don't expect you all to know that and have that memorized, which is why we encourage everybody to lean on your partners, lean on your travel planners, because we are the experts in these products. We spend day after day after day learning about which destinations offer which validity and which pass you need for where and which ones have restrictions, and can easily talk to your membership and your trip leaders about, all right, well, if you're doing these 2 trips, it makes sense to buy a base pass. It's way cheaper than buying 2 sets of lift tickets. Or there's no reason to buy a pass for these destinations because the lift tickets are still such a great deal. One thing to note is that in the planning world, Altera Resorts and Icon Partners are still doing a fantastic job of offering group lift ticket products. So many of those destinations, if you travelers are only going on one trip, you can still get a reasonable 5-day lift ticket at Steamboat, at Mammoth, at Bachelor, and many of these Icon partners. In the Vail portal, in the Vail partnership world, they very, very much encourage the pass products, and the Epic Day Pass products have essentially taken over the concept of group lift tickets. There are still lift ticket products that you can buy if you end up signing up for a trip super late or there was a cancellation and somebody jumped in at the last minute, but they are 2 to 3 times more expensive than what those Epic Day Pass products price out to be. So that is going to be your best bet, and it's going to be more difficult and more cost restrictive in Epic destinations to add a lift ticket product early into your trip. So just keep using your tour operators, your tour operator partners to plan your destinations, to know what your options are before you get on that trip while you're booking that trip. Hey, what are my lift ticket choices? Are we going to have lift ticket choices, or do we have to essentially buy pass products? Make sure you know that, and make sure you're educating your travelers on all of that. That does it for pass products. Looks like I do have some questions now. Oh, we're going to jump back to airfare for just a second. Ever heard of airlines doing maxed group size of high 30s for Jackson Hole this next season? Yes, all of the airlines absolutely maximize group records. They basically take the plane and they're never going to allocate more than 2/3 of an aircraft to group capacity. So whether that's in one booking or multiple bookings, if you're on a 737, one group is not likely going to take up 2/3 of that plane, but they're still going to only allocate about 2/3 of an aircraft to group revenue. They're going to leave all the rest of the airplane open for individual ticketing. Some of the other things as far as like restrictions go, Alaska Airline restricts the number of ski bags that you can take on an aircraft. So even if they'll give you 40 seats on a group record, you're only allowed to have 25 sets of skis checked on a group record. So that's something very unique to Alaska, but worth noting. Next question. Our club has found that issue with, oh yeah, so that's just a comment. Our club has found that issue in 27 European trips. We're limited because of aircraft size for domestic connection. Absolutely. How much cheaper are the passes in March, April? $100 cheaper, 150, 200. I didn't talk about the difference between Icon passes with a tour operator partner versus Epic passes with a tour operator partner. And that is absolutely worth noting and relevant to this question. So Epic passes, if you have a wholesale contract, so I have a contract with Vail that allows me to sell Epic passes. I have to sell that Epic pass. It doesn't matter if I'm selling it to a person or to a group of 100. It has to be sold at the same price that they sell the pass for online. Big change this year, they added taxes to regional taxes to a bunch of their pass products. So that's something that you'll see as you're looking around and shopping on pass products. It's listed differently depending on where you're looking at the pass pricing, but ultimately you're going to end up paying the same price for Epic passes, regardless of where you buy them. The difference is going to come in the perks that a tour operator partner is offering you. So every one of your travel partners sets up their own perk programs where they say, oh, if you buy an Epic local pass, I'm going to give you $40 off your trip. Or whatever the case is. Everybody has their own. They all do them a little bit differently, but most of the time you will be incentivized to buy your Epic passes through a tour operator partner and get some sort of kickback for it, some sort of trip discount because you bought the pass through them. On the contrary, Icon has a group program. So while we are a wholesaler we have a wholesale contract with Icon, we also have the opportunity to set up exclusive group pricing for all of our, ski clubs. Basically, anybody, I can't just set up an online group of like, yay, Sarah's favorite ski friends, and call that a group and then sell them all these cheaper passes. They have to be a legitimate group like all you guys are. And so we identify our groups to Icon, and in doing that, we're able to offer your membership a pass price that is discounted off of the published pass price. That discount program lasts from when they put the passes on sale until September. After September, we can still sell the passes, but that group pricing expires. And if we sell passes to our groups, it's sold at the same price as what is published direct. So when you ask about how much cheaper is it in March or early April compared to what's next, we saw Epic didn't increase their price at all from when it was very first released. So far, the pricing with Epic until next weekend is still the same price as when they released. The difference is the perks that you got with it. So originally, if you bought an Epic Pass, you got 10 friend tickets, and then they reduced that back. They had a deadline in April, and it's only 6 tickets now. You get 6 friends tickets instead of 10. And then in 7 days or something, like maybe even 5 days now, the actual pass pricing is going to increase. Historically, we've seen that price increase has only been 5 to 8%, depending on the pass product. So not gigantic, but worth noting. In the Icon world, it does go up. So the initial renewal price and the very first price that was out there, I believe, I didn't pay very close attention. I believe it increased like $150 on the full pass from the original pricing to what the pricing is now. But our group discount, our group pricing only changed $40. So the group pricing is if you don't have a partnership with a tour operator that you're selling your members these exclusive group Icon passes instead of the published Icon passes, then you're doing your membership a disservice. You need to go pick a tour operator and ask them to set up a link for you so that you can offer your membership these discounted exclusive, I'm not supposed to say discounted, this is going to be published, I'm going to get in trouble, these exclusive group rates through Icon. So use your tour operator friends. They are going to give you guys the best. You'll get the same perks as with Icon or with Epic. Everybody has their trip discount programs they have set up, but you're also going to get better pass pricing if you're partnered with a tour operator. That was a very long-winded answer. All right. It's hard to know if a pass is the better option, even if several destinations are on the same pass. If we don't have the group lift ticket pricing from the tour operator, we found in 26 that for several people it was less expensive to go with group tickets through the travel agent than to purchase the pass. That is absolutely true. And the resorts are doing better and better about establishing their group lift ticket pricing earlier. The whole booking cycle, everybody's had to adjust to it. 2 years ago, if I asked a property for lodging right now for 2028, they would literally laugh in my face and say, Sarah, we are not even done selling 27. You come talk to me in a year and we'll figure this out. Luckily, they've changed their tune because we've seen that shift. And most of the lodging properties are absolutely able to start that 18-month 2-year booking cycle. And the same goes for the lift tickets. originally, have never had to have those rates established in a timeline to be able to compare these past prices. But slowly but surely, we see that their revenue teams are able to come up with what that pricing will be so that potentially in the springtime, in March, April, May, you're going to be able to actually compare those prices and say, okay, before this past price increases again, I can actually compare and know that a steamboat lift ticket is this and a snowmass lift ticket is this. And when I add those together, it's way more expensive. Or a mammoth ticket is this and a bachelor ticket is this, and that's still $200 less than the past price. So they're getting there. It's a slow evolution. We're all trying to get behind it. But we're getting there slowly but surely to actually have the data to make the best choices possible. So there's some more chatter just about the price increases. All right. So there was another comment for Icon. Is there a reason to go through a tour operator versus going through the NSCF for their exclusive pricing? It's all the same. So if you have that link for one of your councils has a link and you're a club underneath one of those council umbrellas, as long as you're booking it through an exclusive group link, all of that pricing is the same. It's all the same, better pricing than if you go direct. All right, we make it through the chat. All right, moving right along. So diving into the booking cycle, we've talked a lot about that already and how it relates to the past sales. And I really believe that that is like the strongest driver of this booking cycle change, and really motivator for us due to its potential to give our membership better pricing, better packages, better options. Along with that, though, is a big incentive. The lodging availability has changed significantly, especially in condos, not necessarily in hotel properties, but in condo properties. We've seen that the lodging availability and inventory has changed, and revenue management's allocation of units because of the smaller inventory has changed, which has added to a bigger demand to book early to make sure you're getting that inventory before somebody else does. And then in that booking cycle, just something to consider is when air availability is, right? If we're all making these decisions 18 months out, just remembering that air isn't going to be available until 330 days at best prior to travel. So in the booking cycle, past sales, I think we've touched on that one a lot. I don't think we need to reiterate it, but travelers need to plan by April, definitely by Memorial Day. Like Memorial Day is usually where we see that next bigger jump for the best pricing. They really want to lock their passes in the spring to get the best deals. And then lodging availability. So speaking to that a little bit, just to give you some bigger understanding of the driver of that. The inventory, and specifically in domestic condos, I should have noted this in the very beginning that everything I'm talking about today is primarily focused on North American travel, not international travel. So in our condo complexes, there's fewer and fewer units in inventory. So in a property that maybe used to have 42 bedrooms available to rent out, they only have 26 now. And of those 26, each of the homeowners have their own restrictions and their own contracts, and some of them might be putting in their contracts, you're not allowed to rent this unit out for less than X dollars a night. And then in addition to that, you've got your revenue managers that are doing all their projections, and they've got all these algorithms and all these, data predictors of what, based on historical data and based on what travel trends are doing right this second, what are we going to be able to sell these units for in 12 months, in 18 months? And they come up with these magic numbers. This year has been our best friend as group travel people because it showed the West across the board that group travel was the savior for many, many, many of these resort properties. The group travel folks come anyway, right? Your contracts are booked. You're held to those units. Your people are going to come out and you're going to ski and you're going to have a good time, regardless of what the snow conditions are. And in a year like this, where they were not great, those leisure travelers that they typically reserve space for and reserve a higher yield management for, they didn't come, or they came for shorter trips, or they came with not the whole family. So that was very impacted. I've got my fingers crossed that this helps swing our rates a little bit in our favor. And I've had conversations with industry friends about how, our sales team knows it. Everybody that we work with appreciates groups, but their bosses and their number crunchers don't necessarily. They might say, oh, yeah, I know groups are important. But this year they actually got to see it and see the numbers that are associated with it. So I'm hoping that helps us, which is great. But in any case, there's less units, which means many of these properties are saying, look, we're only going to take one group per week. I don't care if that's a group of 6 condos or a group of 12 condos. Like, we get one group. And once that group's booked, like, you're out of luck. You got to pick a different property. You got to go somewhere else. So that has really driven people to try to make decisions earlier so that they get the property they want. They're the first ones in to take that space. And then air availability happens much, much later than the passes. So as you're planning your booking cycle, as you're planning your trips, really picking destinations and picking properties that you are very confident with, regardless of what that lift ticket price is going to be, regardless of what that air ticket price is going to be. You need to be confident that you're able to sell this package and make this a successful trip, because you kind of just got to take whatever you can get, whatever that becomes, when it comes to the air travel. Questions people ask all the time. Oh, well, what do you think air will be? Guys, I do not have a crystal ball. Like, what air has done, it ping pongs all over the place. And I can say, oh, well, this year it was this, and then next year it'll be $200 less. Like, there's no telling. So if we give you a number, if we make up numbers about airfare, we're totally making them up. There's no validity to it. So you have to be confident with your lodging choice and your destination choice, regardless of what air might become. So then something to consider when you're working on this booking cycle that I've seen as clubs have shifted earlier and earlier. I think this past season was really good. I always talk to my team as the season winds down and get their feel for where the pain points were, right? Like, what were the struggles between them and the trip leaders this year, and the hardest things to manage? And one of the things that came up was trip leaders' knowledge of their own trips, which at first to me was like, what? How does the trip leader not know the trip that they're running? This is wackadoodle to me. But it wasn't an isolated incident. And I started thinking a lot more about it. And I honestly believe that a lot of the booking cycle pushback is attributed to this, because we're locking in a trip right now. Who is your trip planner for your organization right now? They're working with the trip committee and coming up with destinations and building these contracts. And then sometime down the line, when are your officer elections? Like, they're going to turn over and somebody new is going to come into that trip planner role. And were they involved in the first round of trip planning for this destination? And when do your trip leaders get assigned to these packages that trip planners have already put together? And how is that transition? Like, who held whose hand along the way when these roles are changing over the course of 18 to 24 months? Because some organizations have the same people doing it. I mean, we all know it's really hard to get new people involved. So in many cases, it is all the same people. But in the lucky case that you are bringing in new trip leaders and new officers to your organization, how much do they know about the original booking and the original terms? And are they being reviewed? And do they know that there isn't a trip leader comp built into this? Or do they know that there's not individual transfers available? And all of a sudden, it's a month before the trip, and the trip leader's having a meltdown because they didn't know these things. And we're going, but how did you not know these things? So all the way back to that communication tool, right? As the timeline progresses, making sure that your organizations are transitioning your trip contracts and your commitments forward to whoever's adopting them, and then having that communication with your trip leaders, we're setting up kind of a new thing within our organization this year, is touching base with each of the trip leaders this summer to just set forth expectations and do a quick review. Whoever the trip director is and whoever those trip leaders are, getting on a Zoom call together and saying, okay, are we all on the same page, right? Like, this is where we're going. This is our plan for transportation. These are your options for group dinners. Like, do you want us to send payment reminders? Or are you going to send payment reminders? Making sure everybody's on the same page so that we don't have surprises in the throes of winter where everybody has way too much going on. So keeping that in mind, as you're all planning trips earlier and earlier, what does that look like for your leadership, and making sure that it keeps continuing to be communicated effectively to create the best trip possible. All right. Questions on that? I can't. Have you seen a shift back to group allocations for accommodations, especially after this last season? So I kind of touched on that. I think we haven't necessarily seen it yet because so much of 2027 was already contracted or already in the works before the true fallout of this past ski season happened. But I am seeing that moving forward. I'm seeing that now as properties are going, I still have holes. We still want more. Where can I get more? Sara, send me more groups. And I think having that conversation moving forward to 28, I'm hopeful that we will have a higher yield for group travel. We will have a little bit more flexibility on getting more group in. It's a little bit of a hope, but like I said, we have the data to support it. So, okay, perfect. So this next question is my next topic. Have deposit amounts for trips increased, especially in condos, and how far out you book affect the deposit? So I'm going to touch on that in just a moment. I'm going to skip over it for now. Realistically, how far out can we get guaranteed lodging costs? I mean, there's our little niche industry is kind of unique that we're planning, a year to a year and a half out. You can get corporate contracting years and years in advance. It really is going to boil down to the property that you're talking to. There's going to be some properties that could literally let us plan all the way out through 2029 if we really wanted to. But then there's plenty of others. I would say generally planning more than 18 months to 24 months ahead is going to get tricky with the lodging. It's not going to be quite as easy, but most properties now are able to get us numbers at that 18-month mark. All right, so jumping on into contracting. This one is another really big one that has changed very fast. And for all of you that have been doing this for a really long time, it's hard to wrap our heads around. There not long ago, you could sign a property contract for $500 and they would hold 44 pillows for you until 60 days prior. And if you didn't make it happen, then they'd be like, that's okay, try again next year. That is so far gone in the past now. It's not even funny. I'm going to review here because I'm going to get ahead of myself. So we're going to touch on being efficient and communicating your priorities when you're asking for quotes. So when it comes to contracting, make sure that when you very first start the conversation with your travel planners, you are prepared to be efficient, meaning you're going to ask for a quote and know that that quote is not going to be valid for the next 4 months while you toss it around with your other board members and decide whether it's going to work or not. You need to say, I need it by this board meeting and we're going to make a decision by X date, because unless we ask for it, most of the quotes we receive anymore are valid for 2 weeks, unless we give them a date that says, this group is going to be making a decision at their board meeting on X date. And then they'll usually say, okay, I can work with that. But gone are the days where we can ask for rates and yeah, it's valid. It's there whenever you decide you want to do it or not. And knowing that every single proposal is a unique proposal anymore. 10 years ago, we all had rate sheets. It didn't matter. There was no dynamic pricing. It didn't matter if somebody else was booked. It didn't matter how many units you were asking for. The rates were the rates, and that's not the case anymore. So if you come to us and you say, we're looking for a, you know, these three destinations, and if we can get rates for this property, this property, this property, that'd be great. So I go out, I check with each of those properties. Great, they have availability. They give me rates. I give that back to you. You guys say, fantastic, we're going to talk about this. You go to your board meeting, you talk about that. You come back to me and you say, okay, we don't really want this. What if we switch these destinations? What if we throw in this other destination instead? We're starting over. It's not as easy as me saying, okay, cool. Yeah, the destination, that's totally fine. The same rates apply. We have to go back to the very beginning, go back to the property and say, okay, let's try again. What is it for these dates? What is it for this property? What is it? So understanding that every single proposal is unique and that we can't just snap our fingers and have that data. It's just, I think that is something that's developed a lot faster, and with the dynamic pricing that exists for you guys to understand what we have to do to get that information for you is way more difficult than it used to be. The next thing as far as contracting go is you need to be prepared with funds. So when it comes to deposits, whether the deposit is the deposit, where there is flexibility in bookings that are further out are going to be your interim payments. So, if you're booking 2 years or 18 months advance, you can spread out your payments in between a little bit more. But when you're contracting, it doesn't matter whether you're contracting 6 months in advance or 24 months in advance. That property pretty much has terms. Every property has terms that this is what they require. And that's going to range anywhere from $1,000 to have the contract, or 25% of the revenue for that contract. Now, there's not a lot that are asking 25%, but just to wrap your heads around what that financial commitment is, if you have a group of 36 people and your lodging is $1,800, that's a $16,000 lodging deposit that in most cases is non-refundable. So that has two things to worry about, right? Is one, does your club bank account have $16,000 that you can put up front 18 months before a trip when you're not going to start collecting money from your participants for another year? Probably not, or even 6 months, right? You probably don't have the funds to support that. So understanding what those commitments are going to be, and again, communicating with your travel planners on what the priorities are. If that's a giant no-go, just say that up front. Be like, here's the deal. I cannot deposit on a contract that is going to require more than $5,000 up front, whatever that magic number is for you. If there is a constraint on that, say it from the very beginning, because we're going to know then which properties we need to avoid. I can say, you know what, I think the Limelight would be a great option for you, but they are going to require a 25% deposit. And then you can decide, okay, do we bend on this deposit requirement and agree to it because we want that property bad enough, or do we pick a different property? So again, communicate, and be prepared for those deposits. Also understanding your cancellation and your attrition. This goes back to your trip planners when you're making these contracts, whoever's building these from within your club, talking to your travel partners about what the terms mean, and then making sure that whoever's actually running the trip and is the one taking those registrations and working on these deadlines at 120 days out, 90 days out, whatever that happens to be, that they understand the terms. Because contract language, it's not a bunch of ski bums writing these contracts anymore. 20 years ago, it was glorified ski bums that decided to work at the front desk and then got promoted to the sales guy. And now he's in charge of the contracts and is like, I don't know, sure, that sounds fun. Let's go ahead and just say you can drop whatever you want by 90 days. That's not the case anymore. Many of these contracts are corporate contracts. You might think you're working with a property specific to that destination, but they're actually part of Coral Tree, or they're actually part of Hyatt, or whatever the case is. And they have corporate contracts, and they're not going to change the contract because I go to them and say, oh, but these are my best clients. Like we want to work with them. We want to make it great. And they go, I don't care. This is what it is. So understanding those terms, what is your cancellation? Do you lose the deposit completely? Is there a window that you can cancel for a lesser deposit? And then the bigger question that I see people have a really hard time with, and fairly so, is the attrition policies. So when your contract says you have to commit to 90% of the revenue, what does that mean in real life words, right? In your brains and in your world, you're thinking, I'm signing up for a trip for 32 people. What does 90% revenue mean? And if I don't hit 90%, what am I actually paying? So working with your travel planners as you're getting these contracts, as you're reviewing these contracts, making sure you understand how that translates over to your specific situation. If it's 90% revenue and you have 32 people on this trip, how much does your lodging cost? And crunch those numbers with your travel planner and say, okay, we're required to bring 30 people. And if we don't, we are going to pay X dollars for everything short of that. A lot of people just don't think about the worst case scenario, and it's worth taking the time from the very beginning and crunching those numbers and saying, am I comfortable with this? Am I confident enough that this trip is going to sell, that in the worst case scenario, we're still okay with this? Oh, nope, go back. Okay, kind of on that same note is we've seen and worked through a lot of organizations in the past year or so, really, like I said, being comfortable with that contract, being understanding that days of non-refundable contracts are gone. And unfortunately, our membership, is decreasing. You guys don't have the number of travelers in most cases that you used to, and trip prices are going up. So what someone used to travel on 2 or 3 trips a year, maybe they're only traveling on 1 or 2 trips a year, or maybe they're saving their money to go on that really cool Galapagos off-season trip you put together instead of the ski trip. Many of you are running adventure travel now instead of just ski trips, which is fantastic, but it also could be like taking away from some of your ski trip participation as well. So really understanding your limitations or what your bandwidth is, and don't just book 4 domestic ski trips because you've always booked 4 domestic ski trips. Look at where your numbers were in the past and say, okay, can I definitely fulfill this contract? I shouldn't be signing a contract unless that trip's going to happen. It might happen with 28 people instead of 36 people, but you're confident that it's going to happen. And if that means reeling back the number of trips that you guys are offering and sending out 2 trips and filling those up, and then maybe going to your travel partner and saying, hey, we sold these out and I still got people on travel. Where can we go? What can we throw in here to offer some more? That is a much better option than begging for forgiveness and going to your tour operators and us going to the properties and the resorts and saying, guys, they're only at 16 people. How do we make this work? Can we please be flexible? It's more work for the trip leaders. It's more work for the property. It's more work for us. Nobody wants to be in that position. So really looking at what can you realistically support, and don't just book things or book a number of trips because you always have, because things are changing. All right. Chat questions. Here we go. Are clubs sending out RFPs to multiple travel agencies for the same time? Yes and no. We see both happen. We as Sports America are happy to give you guys proposals, whether you're booking everything with us or whether you haven't booked with us in 2 years. If you're interested in seeing a proposal and you're getting quotes from somebody else, that's fine. I do know that some tour operators are like, no, I'm not going to do competitive bids. It's too much work to do the bids, that if I'm not guaranteed the business, I'm not going to waste my time, which seems crazy to me, but so be it, to each their own. I do think that we have lots of clubs that we work with exclusively, that they love what we do. They trust the pricing that I'm giving them. They trust that we are going to give them the best package possible. And therefore they don't bother asking anybody else. They just ask us. And developing that relationship with the travel partner that, you have that trust and you've had successful trips. It's like you take your car down to the mechanic and they've done a great job for you in years and years. You're not just going to go to the other guy in town because you want to see how they do, right? Like if you're happy, then stick with it. I think that sending out it's within reason, right? Sending out RFPs within reason. There's fewer tour operators than there used to be, but there's still plenty of us. And I think sending out the same RFP to 5 different tour operators, and if you haven't worked with a couple of them recently, what's the point? Like narrow it down to the people you trust most and go for it. I think one thing that is important, and I see some clubs do that I don't necessarily agree with, is they say, okay, well, we have a great relationship with tour operator and tour operator B. And we want to make sure that they both get business. So I'm going to send Sarah an RFP for a Winter Park trip and a Sun Peaks trip and a Schweitzer trip. And then I'm going to send tour operator B proposals for a Mammoth trip and a Steamboat trip and a Jackson Hole trip. And then we're going to pick one from each of you and run 2 trips next year. Don't do that. That's wackadoodle. Narrow down your trip list and compare apples to apples. Send the same destinations to both tour operators and say, give me your best shot, because you guys don't necessarily know who has the most creativity or the other local connections, or you might send me 3 destinations that the other tour operator is way better at putting a package together for, or send them destinations that I'm way better at putting a package together. Like I've got Mammoth in my backyard and I know the best place to do group dinners, and I know like there's just little intricacies. While we all might get the exact same lodging rates and lift ticket rates, there's elements to proposals that different tour operators are going to be able to give you different creativity or different advantages. And if you really want to make the best decision for your organization, you should be comparing apples to apples. So in that perspective, the properties they know that I'm going to call up, I'm going to say, hey, I'm doing this bid for, the Ski Hawks. And they're like, oh, we already talked to Crystal and she asked us for this too. And I go, oh, yeah, I know. Like we all know there's no secrets. You're not getting a higher price. The property knows that it's for the same group and they're giving the same rate, and then you'll book with one or the other. So you're not getting higher rates because you're double bidding. Back in the day when we could get airfare, that's absolutely the case because the airline doesn't know any better. And the first tour operator would get the best rates and the second tour operator would get higher rates, but it was all for the same club. So then the same club was using the whole airplane and it was crazy. So that's kind of my 2 cents on bidding and RFPs. Our club does non-ski trips that are outside Sport America's purview. So do we use others depending on the type of trip? I think that was a statement, maybe. Oh, so we do use. Yeah, that was a statement. Sorry. Ba, 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 ba. If your travel agent's only providing glorified ski bum half-page contracts, I would encourage you to explore another travel agent partner because your contract should be including all of the relevant information. It should be detailing, even to the point of like bedding, if it's specified bedding or if there's varied bedding, like that should be noted in your trip agreements. It should be noting what your current air itinerary is. It should be noting, that airline taxes can change, that fuel surcharges can be put in there. It should be noting in your transportation quote, if they're charging X dollars per transportation, is that a per person cost or is that based on splitting a charter bus by X number of people? And what is that X number of people? It should have all of the details, all the nitty gritty about when you get to drop your lodging, what your cancellation is going to be, how much you're going to be charged if you drop at what point. all the things. If it doesn't have all the things, or if you ask for it and they won't give you all those things, I would encourage you to find someone else that will. There's probably little reason to send RFPs to more than 2 tour operators. Yes, I'd agree with that. 2 or 3. I mean, if you're working with a couple. Years ago, we were able to get quotes from multiple destinations for a week, and we had a window of time to compare them and decide. Is it still possible to request multiple bids using one tour operator, knowing they will not be received at the same time? I'm not sure I understand, knowing that the proposals won't be received at the same time. Like, if you ask me you're gonna book 4 trips next year, but you might be asking me for 6 destinations, right? So I'm going to give you proposals for all 6 of those things. Typically, I'll go out and I will get as much information as I can before whatever date you request that information by. If you say, hey, I've got a board meeting coming up, in a week and a half, I will get as many of those proposals put together as possible for that meeting. And then, say, hey, I didn't get enough responses from this destination, so I didn't include that one. I'm not sure if that's the right answer to that. What percentage of the trips do you send a representative from Sports America versus other tour operators? I have no idea on other tour operators what their criteria is for having somebody on site. We just recently started doing international trips, and I know our international agent offers that as she's building proposals and quotes for you, that if you're interested in her participating with you, she just needs to know that from the beginning to make sure that she can accommodate that, whether it's a club trip of 32 or 100. We just work that into our international bids from the beginning. Domestically, it's all council trips. If it's a council trip, we absolutely have somebody on site from the day or 2 before until the very last person gets on the airplane. If it's a club trip, our criteria is usually about 100. If you have more than 100 people on site, we'll absolutely send somebody out to just help out, make sure that the lodging is what it needs to be, kind of help people get checked in. But there's wiggle room to that depending on the destination. There's some places that have a lot more moving parts than other destinations. And if you've got, a group of 60 to 80 people, and your trip leader is feeling overwhelmed and you'd like some on-site support, yes, tell me and we'll make it happen. But that's just us. And it gives us a good excuse to go ski with you. So we're always happy to have a reason to get out into the snow. All right. Moving right along to group travel. Group travel is still great. I feel like this topic tends to get a bit doomsday, and we just are like, oh my gosh, there's so much to navigate. How are these trips even still good? Like, how do we get people? How do we stay relevant? But it is still good. Let's end on a positive note, right? There's still great value. If you take any one of your packages that you're putting together and you try to build that as an individual, it's going to be more expensive, hands down. And then they're not going to get the great experiences and the camaraderie and the added value that they get by traveling with the group. And so what can we do to kind of ensure that success and things that we've seen that have really helped? As I've said the entire day, communicate, make sure you're setting your expectations. That communication starts from the very beginning between your organizers and your travel planners, making sure that you're setting up the best package for your people, because we do custom trips. Nothing we do, we're never ever going to put together a package and then send it out to you and say, hey, you should book this trip. No. You guys tell me what your best package is going to be for your travelers. And that might look different depending on the destination. So communicate there and then keep that communication going all the way down the track. We get calls all the time from travelers being frustrated and looking back, just going, God, it wasn't long ago when I could just pay my $1,000 check and get on the airplane and everything was handled. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, that's not what group travel looks like anymore. And so it's our job to make sure that our travelers are still our job, your job, all of our job, to make sure our travelers are still feeling taken care of and they know that we're there to support them, even if it means we're telling them to buy their own airline ticket and to buy their own season pass, because those things aren't part of the package anymore. But making sure that that is communicated from the very beginning so that there aren't surprises, so that they're not panicking a week before the trip because they didn't realize that their military pass isn't supported at Telluride, or that Group Air wasn't actually part of this package and now they don't have a flight, and how the heck are they supposed to even get there? Like that happened this year. It was terrifying. It was, I don't know, 7 days before the trip, and this lady called up saying, hey, I haven't gotten my flight schedule. And we're like, well, did we book your flight schedule? She says, well, of course you booked my flight schedule. Oh, but we didn't, because there was not Group Air in that package. So we fixed it. We got her flight. She got out on her trip and it was okay. But making sure that communication and that your trip leaders are communicating with their travelers all along the way, right? Whether you're setting up in-person meetings or you're hosting group trip Zoom meetings along the way to just check in and say, okay, does everybody have their passes booked? Everybody, you bought a pass, you said you were buying a pass. Did you buy a pass? Do you have lift tickets? What's your story? There's more hand holding involved for sure. But making sure that that communication is set and that the travelers know their expectations and what is included from the very beginning is going to make a much more successful trip and a much easier trip for your trip leaders once they're on site. And utilizing local resources. So one of the great things about the group travel is the fact that you guys as trip leaders can utilize your travel partners and then other resources like the local tourism offices. I'm sure many of you have worked with Lisa Jennings from Go Snowmass. She's a fantastic resource in Snowmass to say, these are great places for dinner. If your group is this size, do this. If it's this size, do this. Like, this is where you can go cross-country skiing or whatever the case is. There's Lisa Jennings's all over the ski industry. So, if you want that resource, reach out to us. We're happy to share it. Group dinners and those social components have gotten harder and harder and harder for you guys to do. Restaurants don't want to do giant group reservations anymore. And the conference facilities, you're at the hotel and they want to charge you $2,000 just to turn the lights on so you can use the space anymore. And I see that's become one of the bigger hurdles for trip leaders to keep that value and keep that social component in their packages, because that's what makes it great. But doing it at a cost-effective price. So I've tasked my team this year. We've started a gigantic Google workbook that keeping notes of trips that had success, and they did dinner at this place and this destination, and this is a great resource here. So lean on your travel partners. We kind of tasked our own team to do that this summer so that all of our partnerships can utilize that next year. Because we see that as a big hurdle, but it's also one of the biggest values to these group trips is that social component and being able to tell your travelers, hey, this is the best sleigh ride dinner in North America. It might be expensive, but if you're ever wanted to do a sleigh ride dinner, this is where you need to do it. Or you're in Steamboat, you can't leave Steamboat without going to Strawberry Hot Springs, or all those little niches, right? Like you are good at what you do because they're not just there by themselves winging it. So with that, let's ski. That kind of wraps it up. I'll double check the questions here one more time. How often does a club come to you and ask you for recommendations on when and where to go? Very often. So I think the beauty of having some of those long-term, almost exclusive relationships with our clubs is that it's really become a lot more of a partnership than it is, a client business relationship. Obviously it's that, but it's much more of a partnership so that we can have those conversations. And we have the knowledge instead of you guys just picking a destination blind because a handful of your skiers said, "Hey, I want to go here." Having the conversation with us because we're in the nitty gritty of it, right? Like we know which properties are fantastic and where the service level is still great and where the value is great and they still give welcome parties and mountain tours and the GM comes down to the front desk to meet your group just because they knew you were coming to town. Like we know where those places are. And if you're open to that, absolutely have those conversations and we can guide you on the places that we think that we love working with best and we can maybe steer you away from the places that give us all brain damage and by the end of the trip you're like, I'm never going to be a trip leader again, I'm done. And like nobody wants that, right? Trip leaders are so hard to find. Nobody wants to go somewhere where you're just going to be absolutely exhausted and feel like you're hitting your head against the wall the entire time. So absolutely have those conversations. We have a lot of those conversations. Are clubs sending out RFPs to multiple travel agencies for the same trip? Yes. I think, did we go backwards? Oh, I did go backwards. Hold on. Let's go back down here. Do your tour operators book group activities, dinners and other apres? It kind of depends. Depends on where it is and like what the destination that it is and where the funds are. You know, in our case, we have a lot of clubs that utilize our online registration system, and all their travelers are sending us all of the money, their club add-on fees, their everything else. And so it's really easy for us to act like the bank. And even if the trip leader goes out and contacts the guy at base camp in Snowmass Village and says, "Hey, I want to set up a private buyout for this space for my 80 people," Sarah's going to pay the bill, but I want to work out the details with you. You know, we can absolutely do that. We can add it to the contract. We can really make it just like it doesn't have to be officially in the contract when you sign it from the beginning. It can be an evolution of like, let's work together and find a destination that's going to work great. And is that particular location under the resort umbrella and they're just going to put the bill on the master account, or is it a privately owned restaurant that is going, wait, what's going on? Like, but I need a credit card on site. So having those details kind of makes it depend. Many of the non-ski activities like snowmobiling or snowshoeing, a lot of those, they're not offering group discounts if it's booked through us. So we'll likely give you guys recommendations on providers that we've had a lot of success with, but then you and or your travelers are just going to book that directly with those agencies instead of being a middleman through that situation. Um, all right. I think that brings us to the end of what I have to share. If there's any last minute questions, throw it into the chat there. And feel free to reach out to me. You know, if you guys have any questions, follow-up questions as you kind of review everything that we talked about tonight, you shoot me an email, give me a call. I'm happy to further the conversation with you if you'd like. And, you know, thank NSCF for putting this together and allowing this platform to exist for all of us so we can all keep skiing.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Everyone for participating and joining us. We stayed over 100 the whole evening. So the next thing we've got is for any of your clubs. One of our Black Diamond sponsors is doing a Zoom on the 15th of June. That the information is going out on Club Pro. It's a program. They're going to explain their program to you. That stuff has been sent out, and so look for it from your councils. Um, Anybody besides thank yous have anything or any questions? Unmute yourself and ask. Otherwise, thanks again, and we'll keep you posted on the next call. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Lisa, do you want a copy of that PowerPoint too?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm thinking that